Thank you, Rev Kev. So hi, everyone. Mercy Quay here. I am the founder and CEO of the Narrative Project. We are Connecticut's only anti-racist public relations agency. We started 10 years ago. Actually, tomorrow we're celebrating our 10-year brand anniversary. We started 10 years ago, kind of as a storytelling platform in response to the deaths of Sandra Bland and Freddie Gray in the same week in April of 2015. And at that time, New Haven was reeling, trying to find a place to convene and talk, just kind of talk, right? I think it's a funny place, the internet now. When you want to find a conversation, it's kind of easy to find a conversation to enter into. Harder than it was when Twitter was around, but still relatively easy. In 2015, Twitter was 6 years old. People were still utilizing it, figuring out the best ways to utilize it. When I was a breaking news reporter, like, let's start a breaking news team and put news on the internet, right? It was a big thing. But all of my work now is centered around the idea that storytelling can change the world. And how do we improve interpersonal relations around all of the intersections of identity through story? And I started my career as a journalist. And in a lot of ways, I still am a journalist. Most recently, I served as the editor of the community editorial board for the Connecticut Mirror and a columnist for both Connecticut, Hearst Connecticut Media and also the Connecticut Mirror. I teach at both Southern and Southern Connecticut State University and Quinnipiac University, journalism, branding, and public relations. So I really stand at that intersection of telling the news and then interpreting the news. And so when we think about this idea of sensation versus thinking, it really is this idea of, what's the difference between reporting and editorializing, right? And I'll get into that in a bit, but as Rev Kev stated, the festival is focused on this idea of, all of the stories out of the lessons out of Fahrenheit 451. And just a quick show of hands, how many people have read the book? Okay, so, hey Joel. So for a moment, just one of the folks who have read the book, give us a quick synopsis as the spirit moves you.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
It was probably high school.
Yeah. Tell me how it made you feel.
I mean, it's definitely like trying to find the right word for it. Like, not dystopian in a way, but that's the kind of feeling you get with, the burning of the books and, just kind of the controlled thinking in a way where you're kind of getting things filtered down to what you should know and what you shouldn't know, not kind of narrowing your mind a little bit.
Absolutely. Does anyone want to add anything before I jump in?
I think it's sort of instead of taking like a 1984 approach strictly, it sort of shifts more towards like Huxley's Brave New World.
Yeah.
It's like where it's like you're given everything. It's like, oh yeah, no, have this thing, have this thing, and like have this distraction, have this distraction, have this distraction, and pretty soon it's just it's a society without substance.
Absolutely. It's a society without substance. I love that. It really is a book about a dystopian future where society is on a hamster wheel of sorts. You are only allowed this single path. And you might feel like you're making progress because you're moving, right? But you're given what to think. And I'm sorry, do you want to think something else? Well, we've burned that book. And the entire society, sort of actually the depiction of it, the book itself is a book cover with inside is matches, because this entire society has banded around this idea that certain books should not be read, right? Certain sections of knowledge should not be consumed. And there are mirrors, certainly, in our political landscape today. And I think because of that, the festival really took this book and said, what can we learn from this so that we don't turn our present day culture and society into the dystopian society depicted in I believe it was the 25th century that the book focuses on. So for me, thinking a lot about the book itself and the values coming out of the book, the stories coming out of the book, applying that to news and our news consumption and where we are today and how we might not be that far from what he depicted as the 25th century. I want to start with this question. What do you take in, right? Like in news, what are some of the pieces of news? What's the content? You know, when I was in journalism school, the phrase content was only said by a very few amount of people. Now everyone's saying content, content, content. So since we have this shared language, talk to me, what's some of the content you're taking in these days?
Articles,
Articles from where?
New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Connecticut Insider.
So you're getting straight from the news sources. Excellent. Who here is getting most of their content from social media?
Distilled.
I get my initial contact with it, but then I dig deeper,
They go a little deeper. Yeah.
especially if I don't recognize the source.
The source matters, right? I'd like to point to you because I feel like I want to pull out. You're wearing a chain and you're wearing pink. I'm like, I want to figure out where you're getting your news from. Where are you getting your news from? Social media. And what sources? How's it come to you?
It goes to me because I don't watch games a lot, so social media, Instagram, TikTok, I would see it comes a lot, and it pops up.
Yeah.
And I think that what I think we have here in this group is what we would call active consumers of information versus passive consumers of information. The majority of us seem to be active consumers, or when you get that first post on social, you're not going to reshare it. It doesn't sound like anyone in this group reshares it unless they verified it from a familiar source. Is that right? That's not actually often what happens. It is a recent poll from Pew, a NPR Mayor's poll revealed that only about 36% of social media users verify the sources before they post them. Does that feel unfamiliar to you? Not at all. And certainly post the election of 2016 and the election of 2024, we probably have far smaller bubbles now on social media because we've noticed the people who share content without verifying. So I wanted to start there because I want that to be the frame of the conversation here. Where you consume news changes how you see a story, right? If you say New York Times versus if you say New York Post, you're getting a different story. No matter what the talking heads like to say, you know, I wanted to be a reporter since I was 5 years old, and everything I did since 5 years old was on the line to becoming a reporter. And when I became a reporter, I was like, oh, this is different. This is very different. But no matter what anyone can say about how, no, we are a verifiable source, we are objective, we are middle of the ground, framing happens because bias exists. And so let's actually talk about some of the framing that happens. 2 headlines. One story, 2 different headlines. Same story, right? And can everyone see? Okay, great. So do folks probably don't remember this one, but certainly you'll remember the next one. Fox News report, dangerous, confusion. It establishes a narrative of the story to begin with, right? Georgia officer shot, badly hurt responding to wrong house. How do we feel when we see that headline? What does the story tell us? Poor officer, right? There's so much empathy for the officer, right? And dangerous confusion. Whose confusion? Is the officer okay, right? Versus CNN, cops at wrong house shoot owner. How do we feel about that one once we read it?
You're confused over.
Is this the same story? Right? Is this the same incident? Right? And I think Fox News does this well. They know who their target demographic is. They know what the party line is. They know what the talking points are. We are going to be ardently in support of the Republican values, the Republican base. We will be ardently in support of police officers, right? Insert issue here that is on their party line. They stick to that pretty well. And if the story doesn't organically meet that, what they do here, and I can recognize this, that piece of the headline that's in all caps isn't a part of the headline. It is this thing that we actually don't do often in journalism, right? It's a title, and then there's a head, and then there's a subhead. We don't actually do that a great deal because we aren't trying to establish a narrative for the reader. Whereas CNN, and I'll talk to you about CNN's bias in a little bit, CNN has a bit more of a straight lead. They're not trying to establish a narrative. They say cops at wrong house. This is just factual. Shoot owner. Something that I'll also point out here, that shoot owner piece, responding to wrong house doesn't say that, for instance, like, was it dangerous might mean that it was, in a dangerous neighborhood, or it might mean that it was in a ramshackle crack house as Fox pundits often use, right? Homeowner actually reaffirms that regardless of where the neighborhood was, this was likely a tax-paying citizen, homeowner, right? Reaffirms the value of the person who was shot. And what's also different here is each publication talks about a different injury, right? Fox doesn't even mention that there was a victim who wasn't an officer, right? That's who matters. The cops in the CNN piece say that the homeowner was the victim. That's narrative. And narrative is just anything that tries to define how you think about something. That's the story of the week, right? The narrative of the week might be Trump hates immigrants, right? That's just what narrative is. Here's another example. Same story. I think everyone might recall this story. I think the court case on this was just resolved and he got off. But we've got New York Times. Man dies on New York City subway after being placed in a chokehold. This is actually a really straight lead, in my opinion, right? What happened, where, and why. That is all it says. There is no editorialization here. CBS New York, police sources. Watch what happens here. Man acting erratically on subway dies after passenger restrained him. The reason this is written this way, one, it's sensational. It is absolutely sensational. The police sources, they actually likely just ran the press release that the police department sent them. Being able to identify when you're getting a press release report versus actual reporting, that reporter went to the location or went to the officers or spoke to the victim, spoke to people on the site, versus what was in the press release is a really important thing. When a reporter puts sources say, or police sources, that's likely just the press release. And that colon, I'm not saying this. The publication doesn't really take responsibility for what is said after these two colons, or these two dots, right? The publication is saying, this is what they said, and we're telling you what they said. There isn't interpretation there, and sometimes in the field of journalism, interpretation is bad. Sometimes in the field of journalism, interpretation is good. This next line, NBC New York, man who threatened New York City subway riders dies after one of them put him in a chokehold. Again, sources. Likely the same police report, the same press release. Man dies on New York City subway after co-passenger puts him in a chokehold. Frankly, I think that's a straight lead, right? It doesn't, anything that tries to justify someone's murder in a headline or I'm a journalist and I can't necessarily murder. That is a judicial statement. But anything that tries to justify someone's killing in a headline is opinion. That is not straight news. That is sensationalism that gets into the space of if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Fully back to that, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Fully
please.
back to that for just a minute, but there might have been intent to say co-passenger, because if you go to the first one, did a police officer put him in a chokehold, and therefore the police are at fault?
Right.
As opposed to, but they made it very clear further down when they say co-passenger. So that one word, it's a very
Different
shift,
tone.
emphasis.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And intention. The
Yes.
reader can look at this and say, okay, I have a better understanding of what happened here. And if you're from New York, this is excellent. Thank you for saying this. If you're from New York and you've ever ridden a subway, suddenly you have a good sense of the story that happened here.
And I am from New York.
Exactly. Right? And so this first one, being placed in a chokehold. Do folks know what I mean when I say passive voice? Okay, great. So when I'm talking about passive voice, we're not saying who did what. We're just saying what happened, right? He was placed in the chokehold. By who, right? Versus active voice would say after police placed him in a chokehold, there's ownership there. That action has an owner. Things don't happen in a void. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I actually still think that both of these are straight leads. I think with that single change, co-passenger, it says that there wasn't necessarily a different power dynamic here. There wasn't a law enforcement interaction. And when you say chokehold, the immediate assumption is that there was law enforcement interaction. So I really do appreciate bringing that out. So what is news really? There is, and I want to hear from you all, like, what do you genuinely think news is if you had a one-liner? And how often do we think about this question?
Not enough. Right. It's a cool
just
Kendrick remark.
information. It's just information put forth for interpretation by the viewer.
Information put forth for interpretation by the viewer. Joel, I think I was going to hear you say something.
I mean, you look at the news, like newness, like it's the new information. This is the new information. This is what So it's like this. This is the. If you don't know this, then you don't know what's going on in the world. So it's like the latest
Current events.
glut of current events that's coming at you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
So what do I teach my students? What did I learn when I was in J school, right? News has elements to it. And we might not think about this consciously, right? We're not like, oh, this is timely and relevant and has human spirit and it is unusual and therefore it is news every time we read an article. But we know it when we see it. It's one of those things that we can deeply feel it. This is news. And I think a great deal of like, if you're walking down the street and it's the same path every single day, what makes something an event that you would remember? Something on this list, right? Something unusual, the magnitude. If you tripped on a quarter, if you tripped on the curb. No, I meant that. If you tripped on a quarter, it's kind of small, you're not worried about it. You might actually bend down and pick it up. Well, I can't believe I just tripped on a quarter. If you tripped over the curb, the magnitude of that trip makes it an event. It makes it maybe not news, but it makes it an event, something that sticks out in your head. So what I teach my students and what we've learned in journalism in J school for years, one, I'll say far fewer sections. There were like 6 elements of news when I was in J school, but now we're rocking out with these 8 elements. Prominence, effectively meaning who is involved and how prominent are they, right? Man dies on subway. That's a regular article in New York, right? Queen Elizabeth dies on subway. That's a different story, right? The prominence matters. Conflict, that's the chokehold, right? But even conflict on its own doesn't always make news. Here's something though. And at the Narrative Project, because we do public relations, if we want our client partners to enter into conversations, we might say, okay, there is an issue out there that you are opposing. Someone's talking about that issue somewhere. You can strike a chord of conflict if you issue a press release and say, X, Y, and Z organization opposes X, Y, and Z. That's conflict. That's just starting from a base of I disagree. Conflict is interesting. Proximity, did it happen here? If it didn't happen here, it's not really news to me. It's news to someone, but not to me. Timeliness, when did it happen? If it happened 3 weeks ago, I'm not as pressed about this. But there's a phenomenon here that I want to point out because most of us might not remember this. The news of Sandra Bland didn't actually hit our phones and TV screens until July. She died in April. So there's something about the timeliness there. It's not necessarily the case that when you, particularly with police brutality cases, it almost doesn't matter when you find out when it happened compared to when it actually happened. These other things come into place, the human spirit, the prominence, the conflict, the proximity, the magnitude, right? Most people didn't find out about Ahmaud Arbery until some time later. George Floyd actually ended up kicking off this domino effect of hearing about all of these other incidents. But in 2015, the story about Sandra Bland didn't hit our phones or TV screens until July. It's at least 3 months later, right? Currency. And currency isn't about like the financial exchange exclusively, though it is. Stock markets crash, right? That's news. The Dow is plummeting, or Trump launches Trump coin or whatever it is. Like currency makes news, but also currency has this. It connects back to timeliness, right? Like current events, that's there as well. Unusual. This is strange, right? This is very strange. How strange is it? The stranger it is, the more newsworthy it is. Human spirit is connecting back to someone. That's why, Squirrel Learns How to Jet Ski will always make WTNH, because there's something about the human spirit there. That's not a human there, but something light, warm, and fuzzy, right? So these elements, when I was in J school, we were talking about proximity, timeliness, conflict, magnitude, uniqueness is what it was, and then human spirit. These other pieces are true, but they're true as we learn more about how the consumption of news impacts individuals. So I want to talk for a bit then about how to spot editorializing. Do we know what editorializing is? Injection of your opinion. So I've mentioned this. I spent all of my life wanting to be a reporter. Then I left journalism. After a career in journalism, there isn't a publication in the state where I don't have a byline somewhere somehow. Several around the region as well. I left journalism and I went to public relations. And my former editor invited me back to write a column. I was like, I have no idea how to do that. And he was like, what do you mean? You have opinions on social media all the time. He's like, right. But I know how to write news. I don't actually know how to write my opinion. And I don't know if my opinion actually matters in the way that news matters. And he was like, okay, well, give it a shot. And for me, what became easily recognizable was, okay, you write for news. Now interpret the news. You are very clear about the what, where, when, how. And now let's dive into the why. Why do you think this thing happened, right? And I was very uncomfortable with my voice. I couldn't figure out what editorializing was. So I thought a lot about how I can help people spot the difference between reporting and editorializing. We're gonna do a few minutes of a few videos.
Breaking news from a federal judge in Boston, the latest of several to say the Trump administration could be violating court orders. The New York Times came out with a story shortly before airtime. A Burmese immigrant apparently put on a plane bound for South Sudan or Myanmar. The government's lawyer claims the second, the man's lawyer says the first. Judge Brian Murphy threatening to hold officials in contempt, warning the administration, and it apparently violated an order he issued in April, barring this person's deportation without first giving him time to challenge his removal and ordering officials to locate the plane. Quoting now from the Times courtroom account, quote, during the hearing, Judge Murphy ordered a lawyer from the Justice Department, Elianis and Perez, to notify everyone involved in the flight to South Sudan, from the pilot of the plane to officials in the Department of Homeland Security, that they could face criminal contempt sanctions if his ruling was not followed. He also instructed Ms. Perez to find out exactly where the plane was and whether it could be turned around mid-flight. And Ms. Perez told the judge she did not know where the plane was. More now on this man's case and that of another person from Vietnam who apparently suffered the same fate. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez and Jeff Zeleny are with us now. There's a lot.
We're gonna pause there.
Is this news? The story and the reporting? Or is it editorializing?
It's hard to tell.
It strikes me as news because it sets a precedent over policy and
Right, and you had different quotes.
So this is the opinion in there.
I think they're about to get into the editorial.
Yeah, I'm not actually going to even play those ones. Those are ridiculous. But 100%, that's what ends up happening on CNN. And it's difficult because they switch back and forth so seamlessly that you feel like you're still watching the news, but you're not watching the news. If it feels like you're watching the 6 p.m. right report from WTNH, chances are you are watching something that is just reporting, right? The superintendent says that the students did bring a knife into the schoolyard. Well, like that is just reporting. This is what the superintendent said. This is what happened. It's the who, what, where, and when. Something else, someone said he's reading off quotes, right? He's talking, he's giving kind of timestamps. And if there's confusion, he's not talking about his own confusion. He might be giving you some tonal framing. The tonal framing is like, this is surprising. I'm saying this in ways that should make you feel surprised or shocked. That's fine because we're on broadcast television and it should be entertaining to some degree, but it's, for the most part, it's news.
Absolutely right. I mean, listen, another element that you can't ignore in this is the Qataris basically house Hamas and they shield their finances, which are used for international terrorism, which have been used to wage this war against Israel, one of our closest allies in the Middle East. So way to step on your own message, Donald Trump. You just got Idan Alexander, the last remaining American-Israeli hostage, back in the same day you're taking Qatari blood money.
Yeah, the only way you should take the plane is if all the hostages are on it. And you know, I mean, the leadership of Hamas is 3 doors down. So.
But even when I was a White House official, we couldn't take a gift over $20. And even so, if it was, you had to report it to an ethics advisor, take an accounting of it. But we were also told, don't even take a pen from a foreign diplomat, a head of state, because it likely has surveillance technology on it. What it's going to take to go through this Boeing 747 and take out anything that could be surveillance technology and pose a national security threat, it's going to cost so much money.
Part of what we did this week also was normalize Hamas. We negotiated with Hamas. The plane could be a gift for that. It's probably a gift for the business that he's doing there, but it could be a gift for that. Now, Qatar does fund Hamas, right? I mean, they would consider them a freedom fighter, right? Not,
But they're not suggesting it's a bad idea to have got Idan Alexander out.
No, of course not. Of course, that specific.
So I'll stop here.
But we don't negotiate with terror.
What are we hearing here that's different?
The last comment he made, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
It's like kids at table conversation almost. It's just you're sitting around talking. It's just, like you were saying, there's no quoting.
There's no quoting. The value judgments across the board, and also hyperbolic language, in specific hyperbolic language. There's so much that you would have to do here. So much? What amount does so much quantify? There isn't anything there, right? And so what CNN does in a way is it'll go back and forth. And even the beginning of this exact clip, the anchor, she starts off in what I'll say, and I'm happy to share this link, but the anchor specifically starts off reporting. She starts off reporting. Here's the story. Here's the news du jour, right? There's quotes, there's facts, there's data. Then she jump balls it to the crowd and everyone else can do whatever they want. What ends up happening, and when I was in the newsroom, we had CNN going 24/7, or not even just CNN, MSNBC, CNN, Bloomberg, going 24/7. So you might catch the news, or you might catch this editorializing. You might catch this opinion. You might catch what they are doing to interpret the news. Now, we all have our opinions on whether Donald Trump should have accepted a Boeing plane as a gift from a foreign nation. We all have our opinions, but the question becomes, should the news, should people who are, purporting to be agents of fact be giving you interpretation? And actually, that's a question I want to discuss.
If it's clear that's what it is, then enjoy. I'm okay with it. To a certain degree.
But then it's left up for your interpretation to, but if it's supposed to be, I think that in itself is not a story as much as it is a sensation that they're just getting the views for.
Yeah.
To have like this, and everybody else is covering it, so you almost have to do it. It's just kind of forced on, but you don't have to go that route, essentially.
I think, though, sometimes what the facts are feels so compelling or enraging that it's impossible to stay neutral. And I feel like our shortcut as viewers is to listen for the opinion rather than we read a factual thing and we don't actually know how to read that. We don't know what to make of it, so we let other people sort of spin it because that's what we know. We know when someone looks mad, but we don't know whether a fact is sort of immoral or not.
Right.
Or how it pieces together without someone telling us how it pieces together.
Yeah.
I think there was somebody that I saw once that got, that's how you do it. He did the statement of the facts, and then him and his boys sat around the table and talked about it. And it was all stuff they made up and felt. And then he ended it with, all right, that was fun, but here's what we know.
Yeah.
And he restated the facts.
Yeah.
So that, you walked away thinking, okay, this was all just talk.
It's very conciliant. Here's the context,
Right.
and here's how I feel about the context. But now, here's what we know, and here's what we know to date. How do our other folks feel? This is a pretty big discussion in the field right now. Should anchors, should reporters be giving you the interpretation of the news or just the facts? And what does that mean about how informed we stand to be as a society without interpretation?
I think there's room for both. I think to some extent we need both. I know that to hear someone tell you like this is the why, it's just your brain uses fewer calories, and your brain's in like, oh, this is easier. My life is busy. I'm working in just trying to make rent and this other stuff. Like I don't have time to go and dig through 3-4 different sources. Just tell me what and we do have our own biases. But like that would play, was it a niacin? It's like we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
Yeah.
So like, if you read just the facts, you're probably going to interpret it whatever your biases are, even if it's just like two different people read the same facts and they'll come to different conclusions.
Absolutely.
I think there is a space, and I think it's for good or for ill because it goes both ways. Like to say it's like this is a value, and so like you'll hear one news source that like we'll talk about immigration issues, and they'll sort of like gravitate towards like giving your tired reporter out of the masses, and the others are going towards like isolationist policies. It goes both ways, but I think at the end of the day, I think it's maybe more important to make sure people are engaged with like media literacy as much as instead of just a either or. I don't know if I've said anything.
You've said a bunch there, and if I can interpret. And I think that what ends up happening, right? I think this question really goes back down to the root of really something that we grapple with a lot in J school, what is the role of the reporter, right? Is it see it as it's happening? Is it to distill information? Is it to help the public understand what's happening? What is the true role of the reporter? The criticism of the reporter, the criticism of the journalist is that as things are happening, all you're doing is writing and you're not changing anything, right? But what is the role and what's the power of a reporter? If I just tell you as it is what's happening, can you take my words and make something of them? Can you understand it? In the same way that you have interpretation, like language interpretation, this person speaks Spanish and this person speaks English. How do I distill the information so that you can understand it? Where it gets sticky, right, is when that information is distilled through the lens of a particular agenda on any side, right? If there's a party line, right? If there's a talking point that has been disseminated to all of the senators throughout that day, and suddenly we're saying it is the right of the president to deport whoever he wants, and it is not the role of the judiciary, right? That's a talking point. Understand when you're hearing talking points. Those talking points are, oh, everyone's saying something very similar, right? No matter if it's this person or this person. I've now heard 3 people say the same exact thing. If that's the case, what you should believe is that there was an email that went out last night that disseminated everybody's talking points. This is when we say the party line, that's not fictional. This means here are the talking points for today, right? And so it really does matter because they switch so seamlessly between what is news and what isn't news. What I want to do before we move on from this link, I started 4 minutes in.
Good morning, I'm Abby Phillip in New York. If you wave at the camera while shoplifting, is it a crime? In MAGA world, apparently not. That observation from journalist Dave Weigel defines Trump's for a week after a trip filled with diplomatic progress. It was instead dominated by the president accepting a free luxury jet from Qatar, a nation that he once called funders of terror. Trump says that only stupid people would reject such a gift, but those people include many members of his own party. Heck, the 2016 version of Donald Trump thought that as well.
Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money. My goal is to keep foreign money out of American politics. Hillary Clinton's goal is to put the Oval Office up for sale to whatever country offers the highest price.
Now, this is hardly the only action that's blurring the ethical, legal, and moral lines of a presidency. His crypto ventures, his meme coin and private dinners, his son's billion-dollar deals with nations the U.S. does business with. And yet, the Speaker of the House says, if you can see it, it's all good.
I don't need to get into what Mike Johnson is saying.
So this is reporting. It's sensationalized reporting. I mean, she said heck, and someone wrote heck on a teleprompter and she read it, right? In addition to that, she used apparently to begin with. These are words that are used to elicit emotion from the viewer, right? To make you feel a certain way, to make you feel like you should be disagreeing with this as well. It's so unique, it's so bizarre. You should disagree with this as well. Do you see that difference, right? When John Burns, I forget the anchor's name from the previous clip, there's a straight tone, very Cronkitean, just like straight tone, very little sensationalism. And this is kind of what happens when you have to fill a 24-hour news hole. You get this much news and the rest of it is opinion.
One classic example that I always think of when I hear it, and you hear it a lot, it has to do with the stock market. And you talk about the Dow Jones. It was surging. That word surging. And in your mind, when you hear the word surging, you think big jump.
50, 150 points.
Right. And then when you get down to the specifics, it wasn't that much at all. But those adjectives that they use, and that's just one example. But I have found that to be the case. There are certain adjectives that have come into the news that are used so often.
Yeah. And it's difficult, right? Because even verbs do that. So if we are talking about a protest and there's a clash between protesters and police, and if the headline says protesters hurl water bottles at police officers, hurl, right? Now if it said tossed, right, launched, right? So these are, toss makes you feel like, oh, you know what, thanks for protecting us, right? So, right, or just a gentler word. And this is with intention in some cases. The issue is it's not with intention in all cases, right? It is just not. Joel, I love the quote, right? Remind me it again. It's not about.
Oh, we do not see things as they are. We see them as we are.
You see things as we are, and as reporters, I'm not necessarily. I'm gonna do my absolute best to be objective here, but my use of certain adjectives and my use of certain verbs, it's going to change how you see it because you're now reading it the way I saw it. You weren't there. You're relying on my reporting, and that's a really big responsibility. So, what does bias mean in the field of journalism? Right? Let's talk about it for a second. So this is, and anyone has access to this. This is a infographic put on by, I forget the organization, but they update it like weekly, sometimes daily. If there was an article that came out and, WSJ was a little left that day, they might get pushed up on the article. So I zoomed in. There's a bell curve. Who is it? Ad Fontes, thank you. There is a bell curve. It goes downward, right? And to your left is strong left. To your right is strong right. And on your y-axis is reliable or unreliable, right? And that bell is an upside down bell. And the reason it might say reliable or unreliable, and the reason that should be your y-axis is because the more bias you are, if you are going either side, you're not as reliable. You are just not as reliable. Your objectivity is in question, right? And so it's not about, well, they quoted the same sources, right? Like, so what makes them less reliable? That's not the case. If they're interpreting those sources in a way that's pendulumed on either side, you are less reliable. And that matters. So I want to pause here because what are we seeing on this graph? And this is just a snapshot of the top. The whole thing comes out down. What are you seeing on this graph that might surprise you? Does Fox surprise you? I want to say it surprises me because that bell comes all the way down here. That surprises me because they're actually kind of higher on that bell. Once you see what is way down at the bottom of that bell, you start to realize there is an entire section of media that you have no idea about. Because you probably live between these two bars. Your content awareness is likely between these two bars. Right? The further out it goes, the more obscure it goes, the less mainstream it is, the less you're getting into legacy media, and the more you're getting into fringe ideas. That is literally the depiction of this graph. And so whenever I'm working with either organizations or my students, and I'm saying, all right, well, or, frankly, my in-laws who are, conservatives from Wyoming and Montana, when I'm talking to them about, well, is your news reliable? Let's actually just look at the graph today. Let's plug it in, right? Let's put that story into this system and see if this story showed up today, if it's changed, right? I think that it's interesting. NPR skews left. And I think that liberals don't like to say that. Liberals like to say, well, no, NPR is just and middle of the ground. And NPR skews left, and there's a few reasons for that. I think that saying undocumented is just kind of factual. NPR started using a phrase recently that I can't recall at the moment, but it was so soft on the idea of like illegal immigration. But juxtapose that to Fox, where you get illegal alien, right? It's not just your interpretation, to your point, it's your verbiage. What are you calling certain things? There is a news source, it's called Tangled. I thoroughly, and we'll talk about a healthy news diet, but I thoroughly encourage everyone to sign up for the Tangled newsletter. It is written by a reporter who spent a decade at the Washington Post and said, this publication is too far left even. And he's middle of the road leftist, but a leftist nonetheless. And he was like, this is too far left. I'm not going to be able to change minds if I am using these words, if I'm covering these stories in this particular way. And so he changes. Yep, please.
This answers a question that I was going to ask later on, but I'm trying to understand based on that graph.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the most balanced news source.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what the vertical, for example, what facts is. And it seems to be pretty balanced, but it's way up at the top, and I'm not sure what that blue line means up at the top.
That's just a glitch in the system.
Oh, okay.
But I have the same question like
The top would be
so
liability.
The top is, that blue line is a glitch in the system. So this is a glitch in the system.
Okay.
Meet TMP in that line and this line are glitches in the system.
Okay.
Right, but the higher it is to this black line, the more reliable it is.
So
Yes.
the most balanced
The belt.
news source that's on there is facts. And I'm not sure what the
USA Facts.
USA Facts.
Right under it, you can't see it well, is NPR News Now. But NPR is also featured here. There's several different programs on NPR, so you might see it in different places. So for instance, NPR's Code Switch is all the way over here, right? So that matters because certain, like a publication like NPR has several different entities inside of it.
And there's one news broadcast that says it's balanced, and I haven't listened to it, and that's the one that Cuomo does. News Nation. Is that on there somewhere?
News Nature is on here.
I feel like it's right.
It's right in the middle there, yeah.
So what he says is true? That is, they are balanced?
They're balanced, but they're middle of the road as far as reliability.
Well, it also depends
Right
on,
under the golden mail.
I don't see
a little bit
Right under the golden
right in
mail.
the middle there.
Right
Oh, there it is.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, okay.
And I want to talk about clustering for the purpose of like just visualizing data. This clustering, you can assume that they're all pretty equally, like if they're here, they're all pretty decently equal. Here is different, but if they're all here, they're decently equal. When we visualize data, it's kind of difficult to visualize it perfectly because someone can have a point higher, but I can't depict that on the scale. So News Nation is a little lower, but I would still put it neatly here. This is saying something that's separate and apart from everyone else. And so this is USA Facts, and then NPR News Now is right underneath. Right, but we also have the Globe and Mail. We've got ABC News underneath, which I believe Trump refers to as a rag. We've got The Hill, a little bit to the left, but not, it's still pretty middle. Newsweek, we're moving this way. Fortune, moving this way. Wired, we knew we were here. I'm not sure why TMZ is on here at all. 60 Minutes is down this way, right? There's something else that happens for this as well. It's not just how you're covering the stories, it's what stories you decide to cover in the first place.
That's what I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
What you're covering skews you one way or the other and also lowers your reliability.
Yeah.
Same sentence because you're not covering the other side.
You're not. And that phrase, the other side, it matters, right? Because in journalism, objectivity isn't covering both sides. Objectivity is, my opinion is in here, right? I am objectively covering this. We've skewed that phrase over the last, and I would even say like 3 years, objectivity has been really bastardized, but the last 20 years, it's been deteriorating. This idea of objectivity is, okay, if I am Mercy Quay and I'm covering this protest, what do I need to take out of myself to cover this protest? That's objectivity. What we've done is CNN only gives certain news sources airtime. That's not objectivity, right? And the reason, and now mind you, I'm not in reporting anymore. I'm very comfortable with my opinion now, right? So I'm saying this with the comfort of my opinion. I don't know how necessary it is to have an informed, and I'll use the word just, but that has been considered to be a kind of left phrase, right? A biased phrase, an informed and just society. I don't necessarily know that we need equal airtime on differing opinions, right? And we used to believe that. If I put up examples in front of you, you'd be like, oh, right? If Carl Sagan was on PBS NewsHour, they wouldn't also have a flat earther. That's what we've come to understand objectivity to be, and that's not it.
Although sometimes now, like on the internet, they will put two people from completely opposing sides and let the argument ensue. And it's actually sometimes very fruitful because...
Absolutely. I completely agree. This is more so that the opposing side is still based in fact, right? To some degree. I think it works best when the opposing side isn't should trans people exist. It works best when it's still based in fact and not interior beliefs. We can't argue truly on interior beliefs.
This might be a question because I'm not clear on it. At what point did they overturn the fairness doctrine? And how much?
Yeah.
And is there a difference between, say, the fairness doctrine, where they were saying, "Oh, these are the public airwaves, and they need to be stewarded, so that we get a good representation of everybody's points of view," versus say either a whataboutism or a complete bias fest, which is what and I might be wrong on this, but it seems like killing the fairness doctrine is what gave us Ailes' Fox News.
Oh, yeah. There's a direct line there's a beautifully done episode of Code Switch on this. There's actually a direct line into that. So I want to say late 80s, and then it just trickles and is tacked away after that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but effectively what Joel's talking about is the fairness doctrine effectively said that, right, particularly on public airways and publications that received any federal funding, right? There had to be an equal representation of sides, of differing opinions. But we were also talking about differing opinions on things like, all right, your interpretation of the Constitution and this interpretation of the Constitution. We're still talking about the Constitution, right? What ended up happening is, as the fairness doctrine was, one, done away with, and then two, slowly moved, because it approached a point and then eventually, right? What it meant is, actually, I can have a news station where I don't need to show the other side whatsoever. I don't need to show, if I'm saying that trans kids are infiltrating our sports, I don't actually need to show any facts from the other side. And that's a new idea too, facts from the other side. Right? This isn't, right? This isn't alt facts. And so this wasn't usual. This was never usual, right? This was a quite unusual thing that we would see, and now we see it all the time. And I think that I've got theories on why, but
I keep thinking that was Ron Reed when all that started.
They killed the
yeah.
I think you're right. I think it was Reagan.
Yeah.
Well, because it was so Roger Ailes. It was affiliated with Nixon, right? And because Nixon got such a beating which led to a near impeachment. You know, he's like, never again. Like, we need our own.
Yep.
We need our own microphone, our
Yep.
own megaphone.
Yep.
And that was his resolution. We're going to make this happen somehow. And I think it was Reagan that got that implemented. Yes. I'm not sure, but I think that's right.
Could be. I think that sounds right.
I remember talking about it in college.
Okay.
That was Reagan.
So, but the talking about like we are getting far from it versus talking about the dismantlement of it.
The dismantlement of it.
Interesting. Okay, so
And being concerned about it.
and being concerned about it. So I want to talk about a healthy news diet and what we can just leave today's conversation with. I'm hoping that a lot of today's conversation gave you a couple like, oh, that's editorializing and I can spot it now. That is news and I can trust it now. So when it comes to a healthy news diet, I'll just pause here and say this graphic is actually kind of interesting. We think about it in the rule of thirds, right? No more than a third of all of your consumption should come from social media. Like the consumption of news should come from social media. And then no more than a third of it should be others' opinions. So you've got the corner of your plate that is just blogs, right? Other people's opinions. And then at least a third of your plate should be filled with facts. And honestly, primary sources are great. Whenever I get a chance to, I will sign up for the press releases from the agencies that I care about tuning into. You can sign up as a regular citizen. You can sign up to receive press releases from the USDA, from the FDA. You can sign up to receive all of these press releases. Then you know what the news was to begin with, and you're reducing the space between you and the source, right? So primary sources are incredibly important, but at least a third of it is reporting actual facts and data, then no more than a third in any of the other two categories. I also propose this mostly for my staff, and I let my students kind of consume news how they want, and then we talk about it. But what I recommend for my staff is you start your day with the news. You start your day with reporting and primary sources, right? Then you can go to the interpretation. So start your day from 8 to noon, you're consuming the news, right? Then from noon to 5, you're consuming opinion. Then from 5 until you go to sleep, you are consuming what everyone else said on social media. That will give you a good sense. One, you're laying your foundation so that you've developed your own opinion about this before you've allowed yourself to be infiltrated with other opinions. Then, if you needed a little bit more context, and I think about columnists. I'm a columnist. I think about editorial boards. I think about bloggers as context providers. Right, there are content creators, then there's context providers, right? And that's the why this matters category of the who, what, where, when. Why does this matter, or what does it connect back to in our history? That's why I can't recommend Throughline and Code Switch enough. Throughline takes whatever moment we are in our cultural zeitgeist and says, this didn't start here. There's context from this, from the dismantlement of the fairness doctrine, and the dismantlement there. If we're talking about trans students in sports here, that actually goes back to Brown versus Ed. So let's talk about it, right? There's context for everything. We don't live in a vacuum, and so that is my deepest recommendation for a healthy news diet.
Although there have been a few times I've heard Throughline, and I went, well, maybe. I mean, so the context had a little opinion of it.
And I really appreciate that, because what it still means is you're discerning, right? I think what ends up happening is when we put our brains on autopilot and, okay, so-and-so said this, so I regurgitate it, right? As opposed to, this person said this. And as a reporter, being trained as a reporter, if someone said something, I never take that back and say it as my own words. I say, I heard on X, I haven't verified, right? And I don't mean Twitter. I mean, I heard from X, location, that, and I haven't verified this yet. Or if I repost things, I think for the folks who follow me here, if I see something that seems interesting, I'll do one of two things. I'll do one of three things. One, I'll verify it before I post it. Two, if I don't have time to do the verification, if I'm running into something, I'll either decide not to post it, or if the source is something that, some place that I've like shared before and I feel good about sharing it, I'll share it with the caveat that I have not yet verified this. Or I'll say like, I haven't independently verified this. And if you hear a news source say that, this has not been independently verified by NPR, right? That station is trying to be as forthcoming with their reporting as possible, which means we got this from ABC. Or as a reporter here at NPR, we heard this from the New York Times. And that's when things start to get regurgitated. And, on my team, we talk a lot about what makes something a fact. And I think I actually want to, this is the last slide here. And it's like, you don't actually have to know everything, right? You just have to be discerning about the things that you hear. And I want to leave on the question to you, what makes something a fact?
You said it occurred, that it happened. How do you know it happened?
It has to be verifiable somehow.
Verify how?
Through a source that probably was there, but then again,
Was there and did what?
Yeah, and either it had to see it.
Saw it.
But there's
is it observable?
I always go back to believe nothing of what you hear and half of what you see.
Yeah.
Because there's things that are variables that are not accounted for. That
plus two people can see the same thing, see it, and have totally different interpretations. Yeah.
When you said observable, like in the scientific method, like is it
the scientific method?
Yeah. Is it an empirically provable? Like versus because eyewitness testimony is often disregarded in courts, right? But is it empirically provable?
Absolutely. And so,
thank you for that, because that's exactly where I was going. This idea of bringing the scientific method with you everywhere you go is a great one. And what that scientific method is it observable? Is it empirically provable? And when I say empirical, I mean someone observed it, and also in science, it can be replicated, right? And the replication of it when we're talking about news is someone saw it. Okay, so you said you saw it. Can you replicate it? And by that, I mean, show me the evidence of you seeing it. Sometimes that's video. Interpretation becomes, now, he didn't mean that, but what is a fact is that he said that. Right? That's what's a fact. Did you observe it? Can it be replicated? Thank you. Don't stop. Do folks have questions for me?
It's interesting you said I'm discerning. And I think I am, but I'm trying to figure out when that happened. Because I used to read all of them without that. Maybe they got too light for me. Because I tend to be, that's the main stuff I get, because the conservative stuff I can't get past the first paragraph. But now even I have a hard time reading the Huffington Post.
The Huffington Post. Yeah.
They're just hey, come on.
Yeah.
You don't need all that. But I also can see how easy it is, particularly with social media feeding, or the internet's feeding me stuff, or based on who I'm affiliated with, what kind of things I search for, what I said in my house in front of Alexa or Siri or listening.
I didn't even get into that. I was going to get into that, but I decided to not talk about the algorithms and how we create our own bubbles.
Yeah. And it's just always amazing, but I talk about something to somebody in a room, and then I go log in and an ad pops up for whatever I was talking about that I'd never received before. Big Brother's watching.
Always. Does that bother you?
No, not really.
That's why I don't have Alexa.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about teaching and like when we're thinking about the news and neutrality and subjectivity and objectivity. I find it a challenge of teaching is how or if you should be as objective or neutral as possible. Because I mean, this is one of the complaints about higher education, right? Is that it's liberal leaning. And I work at Southern Connecticut State University, a social justice institution, and it seems like there'd be good pressure around not being neutral on certain topics. However, I think if that has to be handled so delicately because I think that students as consumers of that person in the front of the room can tell when it feels overly biased. Whether I might agree with that biased person, like it's how you handle delivering in a neutral but compelling and honest way. I find that to be a very difficult challenge as the professor.
What's interesting is that I see stark differences between my students at Southern and my students at Quinnipiac. Stark differences. And I think that one, I want to say I don't have any good answer, right? I don't have any absolute answer. I've got the answer that seems to have worked for me, except my evaluations always say that I'm snarky. I don't know what I'm doing, but and sassy, snarky and sassy. What I'll say is, yeah, this is like I'm okay with that. What I'll say is, and I take this out of the book of public relations, is like, how do I want you to interact with me? Right? I'm a full human being that has thoughts and beliefs. Here are the ones I have, right? That's going to be really different than what we're learning, particularly because I'm teaching journalism. I don't know how you do it in the social justice institute, but like teaching journalism, it's really easy for me to say, I'm going to teach you the techniques here.
No, I just meant that Southern's culture, mostly social justice institutions.
Yes.
So there's this.
Okay, got it.
Writ into its definition is a liberal standpoint. Like we're proud of that, but when it comes to the arena of education, it gets tested as to whether you can allow people to come to their own opinion or whether you're pushing.
And there used to be a sense of like, oh, this is a liberal arts college. You can assume that we all have the same general ideas. And I'm not actually sure what happened. I think Joe Rogan happened. I also think the other thing happened, Kev, this is something that you sparked for me. You said with the internet, another phrase that I've been thinking a lot about is, right, like, I'm of a generation where we used to say going on the internet. It was a thing you did. Like, you went on the internet. It assumed that there were times where you were off the internet, right? Now we're never. Right, you are either online or offline, and that's just about you. That's not about it, right? Like, and I think a lot of different things happened. We are seeing how algorithms filter young women in a particular direction, and young men go further and further right, and further Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate and all these influencers who really harp on this idea of two things. One, like somehow the loss of masculinity and replacement theory. We see those two things proliferating male algorithms far more than we see them proliferating female algorithms or algorithms for like women and young women. And I think when it comes down to it, what I hope that I'm teaching my students is like how to think, and how to discern, right? What do you know that contradicts? And I bring this question up a lot, particularly in my sometimes in my branding classes. What do you know that contradicts what this brand is telling you, right? And that can apply to anything, but it works really well in branding because companies are marketing to us all the time various things. What do you know that contradicts what this brand is telling you? and just learning how to discern from there. And it's not easy. And I think what's more is that I think you said this as well. You don't know if you were always discerning, but like things have changed, and that made me think about the evolution of your discernment. You have to stay sharp. It's a practice. It's not a destination.
I think that comes back to the scientific method question. So when you said, empirically prove it, it kind of struck a chord with me because scientists never prove anything.
Well, yes,
Because evidence.
that's great.
Yeah.
Sorry, I betrayed myself by science.
No, yeah.
But we never actually, you always have to have this tension in your mind that this
Collecting
theory
evidence towards.
could be wrong.
You can prove yourself wrong. Like,
Exactly. So you do controls and experiments, you find contradictions to say, is this theory working? And if it isn't, you have to deal with it.
yes.
But
Careful on that use of theory.
what's that?
Careful on that use of theory.
Okay. But I think there's a willingness to deal with ideas that are in tension that maybe we don't get when we go into our bubbles. Just
Yeah.
I think this, I don't want to challenge it and just say go with this. But I think if you're challenging looking for the contradictions, and then you have to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we have to resolve in ourselves is we are forced into thinking that there's a right side and a wrong side, and that is a binary. We think about everything in binaries in our society. Everything is a binary. It's black, white, male, female. Everything is a binary. And how that evolves into or proliferates all our other thinking is, well, if this is true, then that's not true. And sometimes they're both true, right? Like we've got two hands because we can hold multiple things, right? And I think that's something that we can hold in our discernment, right? Okay, so they're saying this is true, and the logic would have it that this might also be true, but they somehow still contradict in some way. And so what is the gray? Like not everything's going to resolve itself in these nice little buckets. It's like live in the gray, interpret, discern, and sometimes you can hold two truths or two wrongs. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Hope I didn't scare anybody.